Realm of Ink is a Shameless take on Hades, and I don't say Shameless as an insult, I say it strictly as an observation. The developers of the game have talked about Hades themselves, and they even use Hades avatars on the Steam forums. It is 100% shameless, but it's also 100% transparent, and how you feel about that is up to you. But the question we're here to answer today, hey, is Realm of Ink worth playing? Well, let's find out. Realm of Ink has you going out into the world to clear rooms and level up so that you can upgrade yourself and your home base for your next run when you inevitably finish or perish. But before we get too much into the gameplay, let's talk about what happens when you boot up the game because it gives off a very mixed first impression. The game has an art style inspired by Chinese ink paintings, and it can look beautiful in moments and screenshots. The art direction is clearly there, but the technical execution of it can sometimes feel maybe a little bit rushed or maybe missing some warmth or fidelity. There's not much room variety yet, so you see a lot of the same thing. And this kind of makes you question the entire game at first boot because you start in a fairly lifeless environment and you're getting hit with story, you're getting hit with tutorials, and they're all kind of interrupting your experience, and they may or may not have placeholder voice acting. It just makes you question the quality of the product. So your first impression here is like, wow, Chinese inspired Hades looks really cool. Let me hop onto the store, buy that, play that, and then you boot it up and it's like, ooh, this feels rough. It doesn't even feel half-baked. And many games do or redo their intros at the end of development, whereas this feels like they did it as the first thing. I'm not saying that as a fact, I'm saying that's the impression that it gives. Basically, your first impression of this game is that it's just a worse Hades, but if you push through that relatively quick intro, you'll see that the game has a lot more to offer. So let's talk about gameplay then, which I'm pleased to say is fun, and that's the most important thing. You got your light attack, your heavy, your dashing, you got various status effects, and ink-themed powers. You also have a pet fighting beside you that will change forms based on what ink powers you pick up. There's a lot of different combinations, it's always fun to see what's going to happen, and you almost get that Pokemon feeling of wanting to see them all. I know the phrase is catch them all, but whatever, you know what I mean. You can even play as different characters, though for story premise reasons that I'm not going to spoil, you're technically the same character, but the point is they play differently, move differently, act differently, so you get a lot of variety that way. You end up building in different ways, you end up playing in different ways, and it's all pretty solid, especially considering that this is an early access title that costs about $15 to $20 depending on regional pricing. And most importantly, like I said before, the game feels fun, so controlling your character in Realm of Ink feels good, the character movement is snappy, it's precise, the attack animations feel fluid, you're having a good time, you know, mashing buttons or holding down buttons or trying to play more strategically, but you're having a good time controlling your character, and that's really important. The gameplay core here is solid. You feel like you want to experiment. You feel like you want to try different things. You feel like you're engaging with the game in a way that's satisfying. I think it's really important that the game has such a solid gameplay core because it's going to probably act as the driving factor for keeping you engaged because you'll be running into some rough edges. For example, the game is so visually cluttered, it's difficult to see what's going on. It makes it difficult to suss out enemy attacks, patterns, and what you're doing. This visual clutter negates the strong art direction, and it just ends up feeling really messy. Now, there's a few things to note about this. One, what you're seeing was recorded before a patch that made some of the effects a little bit more transparent, which slightly helps but doesn't really solve the problem. And two, even if you can tell what's going on in this video right now on screen, when you're playing the game, it's a different experience because you're focusing your eyes on different parts of the screen. So it's harder when you're actually playing. And actually, now that I mentioned harder, this game, while it does have a gameplay challenge, I personally found that the hardest thing about the game was actually using my eyeballs, which admittedly are not the best in the world, but I found that the difficulty in the game came from the visual clutter more than the actual gameplay. Now, there's nothing wrong with the game being visually busy if that's the style it's going for, but it has to be done in a satisfying or engaging way, and Realm of Ink doesn't do that just yet. I'm sure they'll try to get there, but as things stand, the visual clutter gets in the way. The other main aspect that's sort of holding the gameplay back a little bit is the combat design. And again, I have to stress this is an early access game, things will improve, but right now enemies can feel uninspired at times and basic to fight. You don't really get that enemy variety as much as you'd want, and they don't seem to do anything particularly interesting. They kind of feel a little bit samey right now. You're not really being wowed by any encounters. The onus is basically on you to experiment and try out different things and find new ways to have fun. The game doesn't really support that in its design just yet, but like I said, early access, right? It's only going to expand from here. So right now, at this point in time, the gameplay really just feels like Hades, but maybe like less so, or maybe its younger brother that's going in a slightly different direction in life. And I know that might sound like a condemnation of the game, but it isn't. Don't get me wrong, this is what early access is for. I don't know how they're going to build on the game, of course, but the core of what they have is strong. Like the developers wanted, this is Hades with a different twist. It's just that they invite comparisons to one of the greatest games ever made versus a game that's starting out in early access. So of course, it's not really a fair comparison. It's not really a fair fight. I think you'll probably have fun playing Realm of Ink if you enjoy this style of game. It's just that you'll constantly be reminded that you've had more fun playing Hades. But look, if the Chinese myth and fantasy setting is something you really crave, it's something you're seeking out, that can also help you push towards enjoying this game more so. I'm personally really interested in seeing the story unfold, but I can't really get into it right now because of its flow and current quality. So early on, your gameplay is constantly interrupted with story elements that aren't voice acted as well as they should be and that aren't written in a particularly engaging fashion. I do like the large variety of characters we see, and they all have unique personalities, interact in different ways, but the quality and polish just isn't there yet in terms of how the story and characters are presented. I would rather kick off a new save and experience that aspect of the game in the eventual 1.0 release. By the way, just as a side note, I don't want to say too much about the campaign or meta progression just to avoid spoilers, but you definitely have a home like Hades and you can do everything you'd expect in there, like upgrading your character, upgrading the base, testing out different abilities, learning more about the world, that sort of thing. It seems like there's a big vision for it, but again, I just don't want to talk too much about it, just in case people are sensitive for spoilers. So, you've heard me give plenty of constructive critique about this game, and you might actually be thinking, I'm not sure if I want to play it. But hold on, let's wait a second here. My critique comes from a place of actually enjoying the core gameplay. I want to play more. I want to experience the world. I want to see what happens with the characters. But right now, you should know that the game is in a bit of a rough and unpolished state, which makes sense because it's in early access. If that doesn't bother you too much, or if you want to play a Hades-inspired game with a different twist and a different theme, you'll probably have a good time here. But folks, for now, let's turn over the mic to you. I want to know what you think about Realm of Ink. Are you playing it right now? Are you enjoying it? What are kind of the ups and downs you're having with the game? Or are you thinking about getting it? What's holding you back? What's pushing you forward? Let me know in the comments below what you think about Realm of Ink. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like, hype, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.